joining us. We're glad to have you. Jason, I don't know, I think you probably know most everybody, but do you want everybody to go around and introduce themselves? You want to introduce yourself first, or
yeah, y'all do the intros and then I'll do mine. How about that?
Okay, perfect. All right, so well, first let me say thanks. Jason has agreed to join us today and kind of give an overview just on, Robert's rules and just general board management and general board organizations and processes and procedures and how they work in general with respect to a state agency. And he's got tons of experience, and so I'll let him speak for himself, but we're grateful, Jason, that you've decided to grace us with your presence, albeit via phone right now. So glad to have you.
Thanks.
Okay. I guess we'll go just around. I'm going to go to my right then. Ms. Remack, do you want to start and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Kimberly Remack. I'm from DeSoto County, and I'm one of the newer members of the board, and I'm happy to help.
Thank you. Mr. Speed looks like he's getting up to go somewhere, so I'll let him come back in a minute. Mr. B, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Bill Billingsley from Madison, and I'm one of the ones who've done things like this before and thought I understood Robert's rules pretty well, and it turns out I don't. So I'm glad you're here, Jason. I want to really learn as much as I can.
Great.
Jean?
Hi, I'm Jean Cook. I'm Dr. Wright's appointee on the board, and I know you. So.
Hey, Jean.
Hey.
All right. Mr. Speed?
Yes, I'm Leland Speed, an elderly businessman from Jackson.
Hey, Mr. Speed.
Yes.
And Ms. Willis?
Hi, good morning. I'm Carolyn Willis from Carrollton.
And then I have my team who I could not make it without. So Jordan and Vanda, you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Good morning. I'm Vanda Brumfield. I am the Director of Schools and Accountability for MCSAB. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, and good morning. I'm Jordan Harris. I'm the Administrative Assistant for the MCSAB team.
Hey, Jason, just so you know,
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Wright thinks she has the best team. She may have the largest team, but I have the best, just so you know.
Well, I'm sure.
They are
and
awesome.
Thanks for the opportunity to spend a little time with you here this morning. I'm continuing to hit launch meeting, and it's giving me the spinning pinwheel of death. So I don't know what's going on, but I'll keep trying to join you by video. But
okay.
I've just got a few topics I'd like to cover. So do you want me to just kick it off, or do y'all have a separate agenda?
No. This is just we're going to make this as easy and user friendly as possible, and just kind of walk through some of your thinking, and then ask for Q&A, and just kind of make this a good open discussion time to talk about board governance in general.
Yeah, well, great. Again, thank you for giving me a little time with you this morning, and thank you for agreeing to serve on this board. Believe me when I say I can appreciate the commitment of your time. The State Board of Education is a 9-year appointment, and we meet every month by law. I actually tried to get the law changed where it didn't say you have to meet it, just that you should, or you may, not you shall, and that didn't go anywhere. So we meet every month, and over 9 years, as I like to tell people, that $40 per meeting really adds up. It's almost $5,000 over 9 years, so it's real money. But you don't do this for the money. It's just a joke. I mean, obviously, people who are lay people who engage in this sort of board activity are very giving, and you're very gracious of your time. So thank you very much for that. Intros, I'm Jason Dean. I'm currently the chairman of the State Board of Education. I've been in this role for about 5 years when Tate Reeves appointed me. And I've been the chairman for going on 2.5 years now. For the State Board of Education, each board member serves a 2-year term as chairman. It rotates around. You don't have to. There's been board members who, choose not to be chair for, time reasons, mostly just because of the incredible amount of time. I think, 2020, we can all, spend the rest of today talking about 2020, but given the current, the pandemic, the current recovery, I guess, of the pandemic, I was asked in the summer if I would agree to serve one more year as chair, and I agreed to. Again, it was one of those times, not to make it sound like I'm, Mr. Smith goes to Washington, but you when you get the call and you need to answer that call, and given my relationship with the governor and his staff and everything that was going on with Congress and the U.S. Department of Ed, I agreed to serve. So it's a little unusual for me to do a 3-year term, but happy to do it. Again, background, I actually have a PhD in education. Back in the day, in 2003, I was actually working in the School of Education at Ole Miss when Haley Barbour was elected governor and asked if I'd come serve as his education policy advisor. I thought I would do that for a couple of years and then head back to somewhere in academia. And that was sort of what I wanted to do. The emphasis of my PhD is college administration, so not really K-12 focused, but thought maybe 2 years and then get back on track with a career at a university. And, lo and behold, Hurricane Katrina blew through, and that obviously changed a lot of how people thought about what the work that needed to be done, and it stayed around for another year, and then was very, very lucky to be selected to be a White House fellow in the George W. Bush administration, where I went up to D.C. for a year. It's just a 1-year gig. It's a fellowship, but it's an amazing experience. There were 14 of us. I'm still staying in touch with them to this very day. That was 06, 07. Literally emailing some of them this morning. Just amazing Americans from all over the country. You go up there to really learn how DC operates. So that was a great experience. Came home and ended up working at the Mississippi Economic Council with Blake Wilson, running Governor Barbour's Momentum Mississippi Economic Development Plan. And that's, Mr. Speed, where you and I first sort of started getting connected. And then through later on at RAND, the RAND Corporation, I was an advisor to them. So, you and I have some previous interactions, and just, thank the world of you and the work you continue to do for our state. So, and I guess, I'm trying to put a period on this so I can get on to what we need to talk about. It's an interesting country we live in. I now work for a aerospace company, and we lease special mission aircraft to the U.S. government. We have about 35 aircraft under contract, doing all sorts of different missions, from aerial firefighting to classified mapping missions for Department of Defense, based right here in Madison, Mississippi. So, while this is my day job, I call it my food and shelter job, the ability to continue to be a part of education policy in the state of Mississippi, to have those conversations with the people who are the decision makers, is really fulfilling to me. So you won't hear me complain, about this opportunity to continue to serve in education. But yeah, it's a little crazy how I got from here from there. So that's kind of me. I was just going to do kind of like an overview of the organization governance structure of the state board and hit on a couple of others, and certainly go through some of the lessons learned on Robert's rules and talk about our committees and our strategic goals and some philosophy I have about being a board member gained through the last 5 years, and then turn to Q&A. If that, Lisa, sounds good to you, then I'll jump on in.
That sounds perfect.
Well, great. And I'll be, like I said, I want to get to the Q&A as quick as possible. I just want to lay out a few things, and we can get as quickly to a conversation, so I'm not just sitting here talking. Most of you guys might know a lot of this already. Kimberly, I think you said you're kind of new to it, and I don't want to assume who knows what, but a couple things I should have said in my introduction. I was originally in the original application for Midtown Public Charter School based there in Jackson. We put together a team and went through that process probably 5 or 6 years ago. And the only reason I got off of that board is because I was appointed to the state board, and I didn't think that there was any ethics question or any conflict of interest. I just, didn't seem like, I should be on both. So I say that to say, I understand, I think I understand the makeup of your organization. Certainly when I worked for Haley Barbour as his education advisor, I went before the Senate and House committee multiple times back, that was 04, 05, 06, trying to get some expansive language passed, which ultimately became successful, several years later. So again, pretty well grounded, in charter school and school choice. Very different, unnecessarily so to some degree from the way that we're set up. The State Board of Education's founded in the Constitution. There's 9 members. 5 of us are appointed by the governor. There's of that 5, there's 3 that come from the Northern, Central, and Southern District, Supreme Court District, and then there's an administrator and a teacher. And then the speaker and the lieutenant governor both get 2 appointments each at large, so they could be from anywhere. And I was appointed as lieutenant governor, Tate Reeves, at large appointment. I'm from Madison too. We probably run into a lot of the same circles, but so you're appointed, and it's a staggered 9-year term, so it's not wholesale turnover in theory, but in reality, folks get appointed and step off the board before fulfilling their full terms all the time for good reasons. It's not it's just people's choice. They serve, and then we get replenished. But so I just very quickly I like to talk about the other educational governance structures in the state, just by means of comparison. You've got the community college board, and they are a what I call a coordinating board, obviously appointed by I think the governor. Not sure of their terms, but they're more there to help organize some of the funding, some of the policy. But really, the power in the community college world, as we all probably are aware, resides in the 15 community colleges and their particular local boards. IHL is kind of more like us, constitutionally established, 9-member, 9-year terms. I think that's correct, from different parts of the state. So they're a governing board, meaning they hire the lead of the system, the IHL commissioner, and they have a role to play in the institutional executive officers in the hiring of them. And they have a lot of, detailed work, like, granting tenure, approving contracts, so they're far more in control of the 8 universities plus UMC than like the community college board. From our position at the State Board of Ed, our number one sworn duty, when we get appointed and approved, confirmed by the Senate, we take an oath with the Attorney General's office, to uphold the laws of the land, the code, Title 37 of Mississippi's code, and to ensure that the budget's being faithfully followed. And so, that's kind of the main thing at a minimum you got to do, like, just making sure that the enterprise is being run above board, legally, appropriately, et cetera. It's about a $2.5 billion budget from the state. Our total budget is probably $5.5–6 billion. I haven't checked it lately, but by far and away the largest percentage of that goes to the state match for education. It's like 48% of the total budget goes to K-12. I think if you include IHL and community colleges, you're close to 2/3 of the budget, a little less than 2/3, about 60%. So, without question, like the biggest line item appropriation for the state of Mississippi every year is K-12 education. So it's a pretty important duty to ensure that money is being spent appropriately. And we've got a fantastic staff, and I'm not just saying that because Gene's on the phone. To your point, Lisa, we'll have the debate later about who's got the better staff. I recognize where I am, but I do have tremendous amount of confidence in the staff that Carrie Wright has organized and put together. I wouldn't have said that comment 5 years ago, just being honest. There's been some good turnover where we've gotten, I think, more credible, better experienced people running the particular divisions of the State Department of Ed. I have absolutely no idea how many people actually work there. I want to say it's about 450, but the number constantly changes because of the pins being, moved around and changed. So, yeah, it's a big operation. But when you include, the U.S. Department of Education congressional funding, you're probably, I don't even know, $8 or $9 billion total. And if you start including what the local match is, for school budgets, it gets above $10 billion. So not too shabby for an enterprise that has 460,000 students in 155 districts. But, it's unlike y'all. I think our districts, we have a significant amount of accountability and oversight of our school districts, but they don't report to us, never, not once. They're not hired by Carrie. They don't owe her, allegiance for working for her. I think, we institute rules, regulations, and policies that the legislature typically grants us the authority to do to execute the law. And I would even say if there's any rules or regulations that we're making that are extra to the law of Title 37, then we don't need to be doing that. We are there as an executive agency to execute the law of the state of Mississippi and to ensure that the U.S. Department of Education laws are being properly executed. Oftentimes we get accused of creating all these things. I happen to know Title 37 pretty well, and everything that we do, from accountability to whatever, comes from either the code or the code tells us to develop the rules and regulations, or it's a U.S. Department of Ed law. And I kind of stand my ground on that. As the chairman, I'm like, if we're creating things that are unnecessary, shame on us. We shouldn't be doing that. So that's kind of a philosophical thing. All right. Let's talk, I'm not a Robert's Rules of Order professional, but I can tell you, particularly like in some meetings, but generally we live stream all of our meetings on YouTube, and I keep an eye on how many people are on line watching us, and it's usually about 120 on average. But particularly after the pandemic, initial pandemic response, April, May, we were online. We had like 5,000 people. So there are a lot of people that tune in, and keeping going through Robert's Rules of Order is sort of like ensuring that we're being faithful to the process and not acting arbitrarily or capriciously as we go through the order. Having been a board member for, I guess, 3 years before becoming chair, it was good to be able to sit there and watch the rhythm from Rosemary and then Dr. Kelly. Rosemary Altman was on the board, and Dr. John Kelly, who just rotate off the board, and watch them kind of go through the agenda. And whenever I became chairman, I had my own little style. I'm sure Gene will tell you, I like to get through it. I don't cut people off. I don't, I let everybody have their say. I ask, through the proper process. We talk about, everything that needs to be talked about, but, we're not going to beleaguer a point. So, if I think everybody's had their say and we can move on, we move on. And I just, I think everybody's time's super valuable. The department folks have done a, fantastic job of getting the meeting organized. I mean, the professionals at it, since they do it every single month since 1982, they know what they're doing. Side note on that, just some, advice, take it or leave it. And again, the people on the phone probably, already know this, but one of the pitfalls you can fall into when you have really great staff is getting lulled into, a sense of like, it's all figured out and all the questions have been asked. So, I always try and ensure that, particularly on those controversial topics, that we're paying attention and asking questions, because I know that there's a lot of public, including the media, interest in our meetings. If I can think of a question before, I'll let them know. Paula or Nathan, typically who I talk to, sometimes Pete, I'm like, I'm going to ask this question. So you need to be prepared. Don't answer it now. but you need to be prepared to answer it because, you know, we need to make sure it's known that we're paying attention. So just like a little heads up in advance. And another thing that we do is a week before the meeting, so that's coming up here on Thursday, I think, we'll get the agenda, you know, and it's typically 200 pages long on average. So, you know, it's up to us to read it and to digest it, you know, in advance. And if there's any changes to the agenda, I'd like to do that before we actually get into the board meeting itself. However, we have a place in our agenda to make changes to the agenda. The board members can add and take away. And there's a process for that, you know, a motion, a second, discussion, and a vote every single time. And one thing that we started doing, I guess, several years ago is moving to a consent agenda. I don't imagine you guys would have nearly as much, you know, topics. I mean, sometimes we have like, you know, 40 or 50 items on our agenda. I mean, maybe y'all do. I don't know. But, you know, of those, 30 of them are routine and can just be under consent. So that saves a lot of time. We used to meet over 2 days, and now we meet usually about 2 hours. So that's been really great. I'll move on. I'm going to talk just a couple more items, and I'll, you know, get into some Q&A here. Just one of the things that has been very useful is dividing up into subcommittees. So we currently have 7 subcommittees: legislative, accountability, career and technical ed, early childhood ed, finance, educator quality, and academic achievement. And what we'll do is either meet on the Wednesday before the Thursday board meeting or Thursday morning in some cases, and sort of, you know, have an executive leadership team member from the department assigned to that committee to vet out some more of the policy that needs our focus and our attention. Usually 3 or 4 board members per committee. Not every one of them meets every month. Don't necessarily have to. Obviously, the legislative committee is very hot right now. I'm the chairman of that, and you know, focused on what's going to, you know, be hot topic items in the legislature, and, you know, what do we need to weigh in on? What do we need to get to the capital of the zone? You can imagine each of these subcommittees have their own respective issues that they focus on. The other big point I wanted to make is this is super vital. And again, I'm not as familiar as I should be with how your organization's run, but about 5, 6 years ago, we created our strategic goals, our kind of, you know, our overarching strategic plan. There's 6 goals that they don't change. As you can imagine, they're focused on things like, you know, students' proficiency and growth in the assessed areas, making sure you graduate high school career ready, early childhood, education programming, effective teachers and leaders, data system, that's world class, that's important, and then every school district's rated C or higher, so focus on districts. Why that's important is, you know, back in the day, whenever I was first, you know, observing the State Board of Ed, it didn't exist. And what I saw, and I even remember remarking about this, is as state superintendents would come and go, it was always, you know, our state has big time challenges when it comes to education. How can you help us let the best man or woman get the job? Well, now it's like, we're not going to, you know, continue to change every 3 or 4 years. We're going to have a set plan, and it's not going to change, but those that can come in and more faithfully execute that plan is who should get the job. So of those 6 goals, this is where it kind of gets into some philosophy here. Each goal then has separate outcomes, separate objectives, and very detailed separate strategies around how to achieve each of those outcomes and objectives under each of the goals. And so just, you know, from my experience as a board member, like, you know, especially because I have a day job, like, you could easily get sucked into the minutia of the day in and day out grind that's, you know, doing education in Mississippi. You know, A, I don't have the time to do that, but B, I sort of, you know, my point of view, don't choose to be that sort of board member where I'm, you know, in the office, you know, on the regular, checking in on staff, not only because I don't have time, but bigger reason is I think, and I learned this lesson from Mike Waldrop, who ran the Mississippi Association of State Boards. I think that was the name of it, Mississippi Association of School Boards. But anyway, Mike, you know, when I first started, we had went to lunch, and he helped me think through this. For us, and I think it's the same for y'all. The State Board of Education hires the state superintendent, so she's the will and pleasure of the board. And these objectives are how we measure these goals are how we measure her success. And if we were to, be so involved on a daily basis in defining and tweaking the means to the end, but then just measure on the end, then I think that's pretty unfair. Just tell folks how to do things, and then if they're not successful, blame them for not being successful when you're, telling them, how to do it. So I made up my mind a long time ago just to focus on the larger goals and keep it very high level. However, there have been several big public policy issues that I don't mind rolling up my sleeves and committing my time out of interest. Right now, and it changes over time. Right now, it's career and technical education. It's dual credit, dual enrollment. That's definitely going to be a big issue coming up, and it's computer science. And so, if it's, I can be useful, and I'm obviously helping the legislative stuff, having, done that tour a few times and comfortable being in committee meetings and et cetera. However, I can't, if you ask me to weigh in on, the best way to teach a kid how to read, no, I just have no business, speaking on that whatsoever. I just don't have any background, but I understand from a larger perspective, every child has an access to high quality early childhood program, so you can engage. For me, everybody, makes their own path. I, engage on the issues I care about, know I can help. If I can't, then, I get probably 2 or 3 emails a week. I get a couple of phone calls a month, but mostly emails from teachers, parents, grandmas, bus drivers, you name it. My name and number and emails online on our website. And typically I'll just sort it, to either who I know directly has ownership over it, or I'll just, send it to Sonia, who's our contact for board members, and ask her to follow up. And I always tell the person emailing, listen, I'm turning this over to somebody, but if you don't hear back from them in a week, you need to let me know. Lastly, and then I'll hush. The other last part I just wanted to bring up is because I'm, at heart an education policy guy. I love the direction that school choice in general is going. I have absolutely no objection whatsoever to charter schools. Obviously, I was on a group that applied and was successfully received a charter. That wasn't the situation 15 years ago. There was pretty good objection from the public school community about it. I just don't think I understood it. I've always said, while I'm for school choice and get it, from way back when it first got started, charter schools first started in Minnesota. The theory of competition and all this, that's all well and good. But I've always said, whatever is working for charter schools, we should be able to export to all schools that are capable and qualified to be free from some of the process standards or some of the onerous, oversight and accountability. Whatever's working, for charter schools should be working for anybody. That's point one. Point two, I think there's a real opportunity right now when it seems like the world's focused on so many things, but in this sense, on career and technical ed and workforce development and the alignment of the two. And there's when I was first talking about charter schools to Cecil Brown, and before him, Bubba Pierce as ed chairs. Yeah, I was always saying, wouldn't it be great if, Nissan partnered with the parents of Canton to create a charter school and have a advanced automotive manufacturing based math and science curriculum, and with the promise that they're going to graduate high school at a higher rate than Canton School District. They're going to go to college at a higher rate, or, they don't get to keep their charter. So this idea of career and technical ed, workforce development charter schools, I think is really ripe. And I would hope, that we don't just default into charter schools as a solution only in those districts that have, failing or D grades, because I think the power and the importance of it is way more profound than just solving that significant problem. Okay, I'm just going to stop. I could go on, but I think I've talked long enough, Lisa.
Well, thank you for all that. A couple of things I do want to point out, Jason, as we go through into some Q&A. when you and I talked earlier, I think I mentioned this, but just to make sure that we're on the same page, our board's a little unique in that we have bylaws, and not most state agencies don't have bylaws, right? They don't operate under that. They operate under board policies. So we have to kind of find a happy medium between the bylaws and the established board policies that we operate under. So that's one thing that makes us a little unique. I think the other thing that makes us unique is that we also offer public comment, public testimony during our board meetings, and a majority of state agencies don't do that. You know, typical local school boards have public comment, and some state agencies do, but for example, you know, yours doesn't. And there are other ways to share, whether it's through the APA process or, you know, through letters to boards or phone calls to boards, or other ways that people who have an issue or a question or a concern or whatever can communicate to board members. So if you would just talk a little bit about board member responsibilities individually versus collectively, and what that means in terms of responding to maybe a request for public testimony or public comment, and how that would work in your mind to ensure that we, like you said, keep the integrity of the board intact, knowing that individual board members cannot take action on their own.
Yeah, that's a.
Jason, this is Carolyn Willis, and thank you for bringing that up, because it was something top of my mind, especially when Jason brought up that he receives emails and phone calls from various people. So Lisa brought up the fact that some members of the community may reach out to us directly, and so as individuals, what is the responsibility versus us acting collectively as a board? And so I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, great issue, and a complicated one, obviously, because people who agree to serve on these boards have servant hearts. Obviously, I mean, you're doing this because you want to, you know, help, and you want to, you know, be supportive of, you know, whatever issue you might be working on. I'll say, you know, we have a policy that the public can comment, but it's so ridiculously onerous that I've never seen it implemented. I think they've got to request it like 2 weeks in advance, and it's got to get approved. I mean, it's crazy, and I don't, you know, I feel like there's a time and a place to get public comment, and there's a time and place to get our work done. I mean, we can't sit there for, you know, 4 hours and just, you know, hear individual, you know, challenges that people are facing, but I feel like that gets vetted through processes anyway. So we ultimately, you know, I think have a good sense of, you know, what's on the public's mind. Carrie's got several of her organizations or that she has as advisory councils, like superintendent's advisory council, teacher advisory council. She just created principals. We have a student. We actually added 2 students to the board this last year. I meant to say that. So student advisory council, and I think we hear kind of, you know, macro level what the big challenges are. That being said, you know, so Carolyn, I think the question was about, you know, when I get an email, like, there's no way that you can ignore it. And so I'm always responsive. I only was not responsive one time in the summer when some lady, you know, left a long voicemail, you know, cussing me out, and I just felt that wasn't worth my time. It was all about school starting back, and you know, how we were, you know, going to make everyone have an early death. I mean, it was terrible. But other than that, 99.9%, I will respond, but I try to turn it over, you know, since we do have a larger, you know, staff, and try and turn it over. And like I said, there's got to be some accountability. Like, hey, I'm not just like, you know, dumping this on you. Like, tell me if you don't hear back from them. And 100% of the time, they, you know, and it might have something to do with the fact that I'm a board member. I mean, but the department does respond, you know, to those inquiries. So, you know, but I think you're raising a much more critical point, that making sure that they understand. Like, even as chairman, like, there's no way I could speak for the state board. I mean, I can speak for the state board, like with media, but I can't make policy on my own. You know, I can't. All I can do is help people figure out how to solve their problem. I can't solve the problem for them. I can't, change rules and regs. That's, for us, we have 9 members. It takes 5 votes. If we have 5 votes, we can do anything, literally anything. That's not against the law. And so, I have no problem educating people on the process. They tend to think that I'm a full-time employee at the department frequently. And once I sort of, get them on the phone or by email, let them understand the process. I mean, most people are reasonable, and they're just glad that somebody can at least help them, even if it's not the solution, that they're looking for. Does that answer the question?
Can you hear me, Jason?
Yeah, I'm here.
So in terms of acting as a body versus an individual, can you go into a little bit more detail as to how individually we cannot take action versus a collective, and how we should respond to any request from anyone wishing to speak with individual members of the board?
So, without question, it doesn't matter if we're talking about the cosmetology board or the poultry board or your board or my board. Like, board members don't have any authority that I'm aware of to act independent of the board. I mean, that's period. I mean, that's the whole nature of a board, is to have, enough people from the, general public that can come together and, talk through, deliberate, debate sometimes, and take a vote, and the majority wins. And so that's different than being a good public servant that listens to people's, issues, tries to help them. That's totally okay. I mean, I've never given anybody the impression that Jason can solve their problem. I can be a facilitator to get them to where they want to be. But, other than, like, the reason I would say the only exception when I speak for the board is like with media, because I'm the chairman. As soon as I'm not the chairman, I doubt that they want to talk to me, but I think that's, you don't, have to go and get a sense of the board every time you talk to the media. But, in terms of like policy and rules and regulations and bylaws in y'all's case, you can't usurp or bypass your established process, because that then opens you up to litigation. So, that's another big piece of this. Lisa, I believe you said you had an assistant attorney general assigned to y'all. That's important. Aaron Myers, ours. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's black and white, and there's very little gray, but sometimes there's like, well, I think that we have some flexibility here, but never in a million years would I ever contemplate, like, telling any person in the state of Mississippi that, I, as a board member, have the ability to fix any of their problems. Like, I can, always, again, I'm trying to say this, in an appropriate way. Like, I recognize that as chairman, I probably have a lot more influence with the executive leadership team to get stuff done. So I don't abuse that. Like, if there's an issue that I think really requires their attention, which is, about once every 2 or 3 weeks, and, we'll get it done. But I'm never, the one, me, I don't have the time. I'm not capable. I don't know everything. Not to mention the fact that our bylaws of the State Board of Education, I guess our regulations, are very specific that a majority of the board votes, and it's never an individual. So I don't know how to answer that question. It's just, it would be, if I found any board member was acting and on their own or moving on their own, we'd have to have a a discussion about that immediately. Like, it's just not how boards work.
So what is the danger in an individual board member listening to an issue as an individual, but having knowledge that the issue should be brought before the board? And then how does that then play out with the chairperson of the board being kept in the loop, or taking action, as in placing that on the agenda?
Yeah, well, that happens all the time.
Carolyn, I think you
Go
mean
ahead.
executive director more than chairperson. I agree. I think sometimes board members, and this happened to me too, that we get approached, and the danger is not so much leaving the chair of the board out of the loop, but it's leaving the executive director out of the loop. We've got to be sure.
Right, exactly.
And this is something that we could always go into executive session at some point at a board meeting and really hammer it out and figure out what our policy is, or if we need a policy, and if we do, what it needs to be. I generally try to tell people this is the role of the board and this is what we can do. This is a complaint that is more appropriately registered with the executive director, and I'll be sure and pass that along to her, and you can do the same. And I think that's kind of the way we've got to try to do it. But I think that there's a lot to it, and it may not be something that we can come up with an easy answer to without spending a little bit more time talking about it.
Well, I wanted to mention executive session too. That's an important part of every agenda that we have. We have very clear legal guidelines because of the open meetings laws of the state in when we can go into executive session. And you have to get the attorney to give you all the to list all the reasons. But the big reasons are when it's a personnel matter. That's usually hiring somebody and discussing their salary and approving that. Then the second less frequent but equally big reason is pending litigation. Typically, if there's a teacher who's losing his or her license, and they're appealing up to the state board of ed, we'll get a brief from the attorneys. Fortunately, that's not happened a whole bunch in the last year, but man, when we first started, that was all the time. I was like, gosh, this is hard stuff, and teachers would come in and we'd go through a hearing, and that's all executive session because it's a legal matter. But I'll be real clear when I say this. Yeah, I'd get your assistant attorney general to list out the very specific ways you can go into executive session, because I have been told that we can't talk about stuff in executive session because it doesn't fit the criteria. And I just understand that we have a lawyer who's telling me that, and I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't have said it to go into executive session. What I meant was that it's not something that we can come up with an easy policy without further discussion. If that means discussing it in an open meeting, or if that means figuring out a way to get it into executive session, I think Avery can advise us one way or the other on that without too much trouble. But I do think it's that we need to talk about and get straight, especially with so many new board members. Here I am, Mr. Speed and Ms. Willis have both been on the board longer than I have, but then nobody else has, and I haven't been on the board that long. So we need to understand how to respond, because charter schools are really doing what they're supposed to do when people are interested enough to seek us out and try to contact us. So I don't have a problem with that. I'm glad they're doing it. We just need to be unified and consistent in how we respond to them, and make sure that we've got a mechanism whereby that whatever they want to talk about can get discussed at the proper level and at the proper time.
And can I
go ahead.
That is absolutely to my point. As individual board members, there will come a time when, and there has been a time when we were approached individually with hope that we would be able to overturn something that the board has already voted on, or to have further discussions with a board member because the person presenting the issue didn't feel like the board knew all sides. And so I think having an understanding of what we are able to do as individuals versus what we're able to do in terms of what comes before the board and how board action as a collective does not necessarily align with what an individual who's outside of the context of the board would have the board to do, if that makes any sense.
It does, and I would suggest that that Lisa, you and Avery get together and decide what's the best way for us to have a board discussion about this, and when. If we can do it this afternoon, great. If it's too late and we couldn't get it on the agenda, then that's fine too. But I think it's something that we need to talk about and come up with, like I said, come up with some kind of a consistent, even if it's unwritten, a consistent reply that we can give to people who approach us individually.
A couple of things there, if I might. You and I had a conversation, Mr. B, last week about public testimony. And public testimony in our bylaws, there are two separate sections. There is an 8.1 and an 8.2. They're a bit convoluted in that one area is specific to written comments only to the board, and it says whatever you're going to submit to the board in writing has to be 5 days prior to the board meeting on an agenda item that's an action item. The second piece of that is about a public testimony during a board member, so a public comment that has to be on an agenda item, but it doesn't say an action item. And our perspective here has been just collectively kind of, right? So, and we've been fairly flexible with this policy because it wasn't in place until I got here. If you'll recall, in November of 2019, I got a 30-page memo from a partner who said, you guys don't have a public comment policy. You've been taking public comments, but you don't have a policy and a procedure. Well, unbeknownst to us, of course, there were bylaws that address that. And they're very clear that I would recommend that we have a subcommittee that just looks at the bylaws, looks at the challenges. Carolyn, you may want to be a part of that. And we look at the challenges that are in those bylaws and maybe collapse them, refine them, redirect them, look at the purpose of them. And then whatever we have has to be consistent. We can't say, oh, school A, you get to do this, or community member board member B, you get to say this, or advocacy group, you get to say that, but you don't have to fill out the form, or you get 10 minutes, or you get this. We've got to be consistent. And right now we have a pretty good, solid structure to work from that may need to be tweaked so that we can avoid some of the challenges that I know not just Ms. Willis has had in terms of being approached by individual board or individual school leaders and requesting an audience with them to maybe grieve whatever their frustrations might be, or to share additional information that they feel the board has not been privy to. So you guys know me well enough to know that I send you probably more information than you ever want to know and give you lots and lots of details about what's going on. And I always seek your opinion, and I'm always looking forward to your input. So maybe this is a way that we can go forward and address it in a collective way that brings integrity and transparency to the process, but also consistency, so that every person who wants to A, speak, or B, submit something in writing has the same opportunity in an equitable and fair way. That would be my, just off the top of my head, how we might want to approach that.
I like that approach. I think we've got to be careful today. We're kind of going beyond the scope of what we have meant to do, and we've got to be careful that we don't ease into areas where we would otherwise be required to give public notice.
Well, Mr. Billingsley, this meeting is a public meeting, and we have guests on this meeting right now. We have.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. My mistake. I didn't realize we had noticed this meeting.
Anytime we have a board meeting where we have a majority of our members together, it becomes a public meeting, and it's subject to open meetings laws, and it's subject to anybody who wants a copy of this, recording.
Oh,
they can have that.
That answers the question then, because I didn't realize that we had noticed this up. That's great.
Absolutely. Posted ahead of time, which is why we have guests on here.
And But I think the second thing is what Carolyn was talking about and what I'm talking about, what is talking about, are different than the public comment part of what we do. We're talking about somebody walking up to us in the Kroger, or coming up to us, or even making formal contact with us through our email, through our telephone.
Right.
That doesn't have anything to do with the public comment policy for our board meetings. So I think that needs to be talked about as well, so we can come up with something. And like I said, maybe it doesn't have to be a written policy, but we need to have some guidance that the board members, makes it a little bit easier for them to give the best response to these people who are just don't know any better, who are seeking out relief, the best place they know to get it. So we can talk about that, continue to talk about it here, or we can talk about it at a board meeting. I was worried about the notice part because I didn't realize this meeting had been noticed up. Again, either way is fine with me. This is not my meeting. I'm kind of taking away from Jason. I don't want to do that.
No, not at all. This is great to hear you guys, working through some of these problems. I think, Bill, you mentioned, I mean, once you get sort of some of the foundations established in your bylaws and rules and policies and procedures, then board members can come and go. But you're still, in the scheme of things, still relatively new. And I think working out what it's going to be and look like for the future is a really exciting opportunity for you guys. To really put your the inflection point on what the role of board members should be. And you're dealing with the same stuff we deal with. I mean, I get all, like I was mentioning, frequently people I don't know just hit me with these problems and those problems, and like I said, for us, this is how I deal with it, because we have a large group of folks that can deal with it. For y'all it might be different, but I think y'all are getting to the major point, which is ensuring that anybody who you talk to understands there's a process and there's a vote, and one person can't overturn the decision of the authorizing board on charters or all that. But you might get other minor problems or challenges all the time, and like you said, just working through Lisa.
Jason, one thing I did want to point out, or a couple of things that you alluded to earlier. I feel really good. Last month we had a great work session, and we went down the path of kind of the old strategic plan, 2019, where we were, where we are, and kind of where we're headed. Now we've got follow-up to work on that with key takeaways and next steps, and maybe putting some meat on the bones in terms of kind of the objectives and goals. But I feel really good about that. And we also are working on our committee structure and getting some more formalized processes and procedures in place for the committee. There was a committee structure there. We're going to ask the board to consider a formal appointment of a legislative committee with me, Ms. Remack, chairing that committee. That'll be on the board agenda today. The board chair has the authority to assign an ad hoc committee, but we're going to bring it forward in the public meeting today, just so that we have our I's dotted and T's crossed, and that we have it in our records that we've taken action on that. And then I developed last week for the board committee definitions, for lack of a better term, so that they kind of know on which committee they sit and serve and or chair, what their roles and responsibilities would be, and what areas of work that they will be focused on with respect to that committee assignment. So we are making, I think, great strides. I think the areas of opportunity for us are in maybe in communicating with one voice, staying on the same page, everybody having a clear understanding of roles and responsibilities, a clear understanding of when we go out from a meeting that we may not agree, and we can agree to disagree, but when we go out, we speak with one voice, and we all support the work of the authorizer together, knowing that there are growing pains in a new agency, knowing that there is going to be pushback, and that's to be expected from our watchdogs that are out there maybe, and some of our school leaders and so forth, and that things are unique to Mississippi, and there's some good things that are unique and some challenges that have presented themselves because we are unique. And I think addressing all those things collectively together with one one spirit and one goal in mind, and that is to serve the children and ensure that we have high quality charter schools providing high quality educational opportunities to children who don't have that option, and families who don't have that option. So I do feel like we've made a lot of progress in a year and a half, or going on 2 years now, but we do have opportunities for growth. And now that we've had the Ethics Commission come in, and we've had Tommy Carden come in, and we've had you come in and talk a little bit about Robert's Rules and a little bit about the executive committees or executive session and things like that, I feel like we're in a good place to really keep moving forward in our work.
No, I agree, and I think we're probably getting to the kind of the close to the end of this. I would just say, on behalf of the State Board of Education, like, if there's any way that we can work better together, or in any sense where there's some challenges that you guys have that you need to have our input or our support or whatever, this is a great illustration of what we were just talking about. Of course, Jean's on the phone. She's Carrie's appointment. You can work directly with her, but this is all about public service. I'll end it where I started. This is about people who are willing to give their time. I mean, we just spend an hour of our time talking through these issues. It's important, and it's to solve problems for boys and girls that are in the education pipeline in Mississippi. I mean, it sounds like a politician saying something. I don't mean it that way, but that's what it's about. And it's from my point of view, there's way more that we can do together in terms of school choice. I mean, charter schools are public schools.
Right.
If there are ways that we can team up on legislation that's required, that this is where a board member such as myself is useful. I don't know that Carrie's gonna, or Jean or whomever would be the ones on the front line, talking about charter school and school choice. But as a board member, I can say, hey, this is something that's good for education in Mississippi. Let's walk hand in hand together. And there's no adversarial relationship as far as I can tell on any level. Like I said, it was 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it was bonkers how people thought of charter schools. I mean, I lived it. So hopefully that's what the future will look like.
I think we're in a great place. And I told you when we talked on the phone, I feel so grateful for the relationship I have with the State Department, and the team here has a relationship with the State Department. We work really, really, really well together. And sometimes they don't agree with our interpretation and vice versa maybe, but we're working through things, on a weekly, daily, and monthly basis in some cases. So we appreciate the partnership and the work that we can accomplish together. Oh, somebody's puppy was barking there. I had one other thing there, Jason, and I went from my head. I don't know where I was going with that. Oh, I know. The Ethics Commission has recently opined that governing boards of charter schools are subject to state ethics laws. I wondered if you, in your experience when you were working through the initial legislation, if you had any sense of what the spirit and intent of the law was around that. I've reached out to Gray Tollison. I haven't heard back from him because I know he was instrumental. But if you had any insight into that, that would be really helpful for us, because what we are hearing from other states across the nation is that governing boards are subject to state ethics laws, but which is what the commission has opined, including open meetings and so forth. But that is not the sense that I'm getting from the charter community here, that they feel like that was not the intent of the law. So do you have any point of reference there?
I do, and it's probably not going to be too popular in the community, but this is what's critical. Charter schools are public schools, okay? Just to say that statement, maybe you do have an idea, but it was mind-boggling to me how complicated that message was to articulate and deliver and be believed. There were so many folks who are good people who thought this was an opportunity to convert Lee Academy in Clarksdale to a public school and remain, like, no, that's not, you don't understand, it's a public school that has not all of the laws, obviously the process standards, accountability, all the things that make charter schools great. But when it comes to the fact, that public money is going to charter schools, that's where it stops right there, period. I mean, you get in public money, you should be, to be held to the same standards as any public entity through the Ethics Commission. I mean, otherwise, people could be in positions on boards who are making decisions that are, fiscally advantageous and not be, required to report that. Like,
Right.
that's just where corruption, I'm not in any way, shape, or form suggesting anybody here's doing that. I'm saying that happens, so, having some oversight, from the Ethics Commission, just take me out of all of this process, make me, Jason Dean, Mississippi taxpayer. I would want to ensure that those that are in charge don't have the, ability not to have the same oversight that the rest of us have.
Well, thank you for that, because I have reached out. I know that the schools in general have felt some real frustration around that, feeling like they maybe couldn't get quality board members because of this. They couldn't get, maybe it lost, impacted some of their innovation or their autonomy or so forth and so on. And I want to be able to provide them the spirit and intent of the law. I want them to know that we, as the authorizer board, are going to have to support what the commission's decision has been. And on Friday, the commission met again and declined to take up and reconsider the two recent opinions. And I do want to say that particular request about whether or not a governing board of a charter school was subject to state ethics laws, that was not our request. We did have a request that went out, but it was about a conflict of interest, a potential conflict of interest. But the other one was not ours. And I want to be able to help our schools and school leaders understand that came from somewhere else, and the results and of the commission's deliberations and decision ended up suggesting that and saying, quite frankly, that our governing boards are subject to state ethics laws simply because they are stewards of public monies, and they have to provide oversight and accountability to their schools, and they are public schools. And I think that was their rationale for the decision that they made.
Right. And we'll just leave it as there's, I get, the freedom from a lot of the process standards and rules and regs. That's what makes charter schools great. But, I think the line's pretty clear when it comes to, taking public money and what you're, not taking public money, budgeting and appropriating public money for the delivery of charter school services. That's where, I think that's where the line gets drawn.
Right. Well, if you talk to Gray in the next day or two, you might tell him I texted him and called him, but I hadn't heard back. So
I will. Yeah, he's been.
I would love to hear his take on that too. So anyway, but I know we're getting past time, and we have another meeting at 1, so we'll have to circle back and catch back up after lunch here, and everybody's had time to kind of debrief from this. Does any other board member have a question or a comment or anything for Jason before we adjourn from this? I'm just so thankful, Jason, for you and for you being able to share your expertise and provide an opportunity for our board members to hear from you and to be able to ask questions and hear from each other. And Carolyn, thank you for your questions as well. And Mr. Billingsley, we are looking forward to seeing you guys again at 1 o'clock. We don't have quite the lengthy agenda that we had last month, and so that won't take quite as long to get through everything. But I look forward to seeing you guys. And Jason, thanks again. I hope to see you, and not just behind a little telephone green sign there, but in the future.
Yeah.
And we do have a couple of things we're going to be taking to the legislature, so we may need your help on that. I know you and I talked about the peer review. That's one thing that I need some help on. We don't need to do that every year. So we've got some potential legislation that we need tweaked, and we've got a survey out to our task force, and we should have some final numbers and information from them by today, and our task force meets tomorrow. So we're ready to roll in partnership with each other and in partnership with you, and we look forward to a successful 2021.
Sounds great. Thanks for the time, and look forward to doing this work hand in hand as we move into this year.
Absolutely. Thanks
Please-
so much.
Please, do we use this same link for the board meeting?
You do.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure. Thank you.
Yep, you're good. Y'all let me know if you have any trouble.
Okay, thank you.
All right, see you guys.
Whatever it is, comes back and says,
Kate, mute your phone. Okay. The Mississippi Charter School Authorizer regular monthly board meeting being held in the Authorizer Board Office building via teleconference in according with the state law code section 25-41-5 is now called to order. Notice of this meeting was posted prior to the meeting in accordance with state law. The audio recording of the meeting will be made available online, and the minutes of the meeting will be recorded. Let's move to the announcement of the quorum. As I call your name, please state present and your location for the record. Mrs. Jean Cook.
Present, Clinton, Mississippi.
Ms. Kimberly Remack.
You're muted.
Sorry. I'm
That's
present.
okay.
I'm present, and I'm in Olive Branch, Mississippi.
Mr. Leland Speed.
I'm here. I'm in Jackson, Mississippi.
Mrs. Jennifer Whittier.
present in Brookhaven, Mississippi.
Ms. Carolyn Willis.
Present, Carrollton, Mississippi.
And I'm Bill Billingsley. I am present in Madison, Mississippi. We have a quorum and the regular monthly meeting is called to order. Let's proceed with our agenda. Let me get that pulled up right quick. There we go. I'd like to open with the Pledge of Allegiance and an invocation. Would you please join me in the pledge? Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
Of the
of the United States of America
and
and to the republic
for which it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice for all.
for all.
Thank you. If no one objects, I will lead the invocation as well.
Thank you.
Please bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for this wonderful day that you've brought to us. And thank you for these people who have gathered today to do the work of the Mississippi Charter School Authorizer Board. Please lead us in the direction that makes you pleased, and bless all the people. If they're traveling, make sure they get home safely, and help us do your work. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, the next item of the agenda is, on the agenda is, excuse me, just a second. I'm sorry, the next item on the agenda is to adopt the agenda. To do that, I'm gonna have to, I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep the noise down here at my end. Okay. I'd like to propose that we add an item to the agenda under the Executive Director Report that'll become 6A. And this item would be to discuss the options that we have for the to look at the bylaws in relation to the way that public comment and public testimony are handled by the board. If someone would offer that as a motion, we can get it added to the agenda and then discuss it at the appropriate time. Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The item is added to the agenda. The next item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of December 14th, with including the board work session and the regular monthly meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to look at both those sets of minutes, and are there any proposed changes? If not, then I will entertain a motion to approve both those sets of minutes.
I make a motion that we accept them as written.
Thank you. Any second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, the minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is the chair report. I do not have a report this meeting except to report that my dog is barking at something outside. That's not necessarily, doesn't need to be in the minutes. Let's move to the executive director report. Dr. K.
Thank you. I don't have a dog barking. I used to have a dog barking, but he's outside, so he's not barking this morning. Okay, so I guess first, welcome and Happy New Year to everybody. It's good to see everybody. I know we've communicated via email several times since the last meeting, but it's nice to see your faces. And thank you to those of you that were able to join us this morning. I thought that was an incredibly productive meeting with Jason, and really look forward to getting to some of the things that he's recommended and some of the things that we talked about. So thanks again for your time this morning. Also like to say a welcome to all of our guests. I know we always have guests. I can't see who all is here, but I know we have guests online. So a special welcome to our guests from the public and our partners and friends that are out there in the charter community. The first thing that I have on my report, which is much shorter than last month, is simply the legislative task force is scheduled to meet tomorrow. That will be our final meeting of the legislative task force. I want to encourage board members, if you're available, to attend. We have been through the process of Team A and Team B, so Team Rachel and Team Elise actually presenting several different sections and getting feedback from members and feedback from folks who are actually not on the task force to present their recommendations. There are 13 recommendations with respect to separate code sections, and a survey went out to our members this past week to ask them to commit one way or the other. So a yes or a no, I support these recommendations going forward to a legislative task force, or no, I do not. And the decision on what comes to the task force will be by consensus, if necessary by vote. One of the things I did want to point out is prior to the task force, we didn't have a legislative committee. So it was going to be the responsibility of myself and the staff to bring those recommendations forth to the board. And I thought it was really important that we have that committee layer in there, similar to what other structures are at other agencies. So there's the task force, then there's the legislative committee that looks at all of the findings, all of the recommendations, and then brings forward to the rest of the board the final recommendations. So with your permission and approval on into the agenda under new items, that's the process that we will use for the legislative task force. Committee assignments, all of you received your committee assignments via email January the 7th. I have heard back from some of you, and some of you I have not heard back yet, but you have assignments, and in addition to your assignments, you have a description of the committees. There were no committee descriptions, and so those came kind of from me thinking about experiences that I've had in the past year and a half. Put those together. I'm open to fleshing out some of the language in the description of those committees, but I feel like they are representative of the work that will need to be done with respect to each one of those areas. And for those who are joining us by through Zoom today, we have 4 committees. We have an application committee. We have the performance and accountability committee. We will have, with board permission and action today, we'll have the legislative committee. And then we have our task force, which are just established in response to areas of opportunities and challenge that might come up throughout the year. So right now we have just concluded the work of the student enrollment task force, and we are on our way to concluding the work of the legislative task force for this year. With respect to legislation, the legislative they got underway January the 4th or 5th, so they haven't been in session very long, the legislature, but they've already dropped a lot of bills. And in particular, on the education side, several bills have been dropped. One in particular that will be helpful for us if it makes it through, and I feel like it will. Senator DeBar has dropped a bill. It's Senate Bill 2149, and that bill will seek to amend Section 37-151-103. And its purpose is to ensure that districts are not negatively impacted by the events of 2019-20. So you will understand and know that MAEP is impacted by enrollment and attendance, or average daily attendance. And so this particular legislation would require the Department of Education to hold harmless districts for ADA when calculating MAP. There is no companion bill out there yet that I've been able to find, but I assume there will be a companion bill dropped on the House side that will track along the same language as this one does. It's something that we need, it's something that we ask for, and it's something that we'll be following very closely to ensure that it gets to the finish line and gets approved. Our schools need relief. They need relief around attendance and enrollment so that they aren't negatively impacted. So I was glad to see that bill was dropped. The performance framework revision work has kicked off, and we kicked that off last week with an initial call with Basis Policy Research. And you approved last month an RFP for them to do the work on the revision of the framework. So we're excited about that. One of the things that I wrote into the RFP that was really important to me is that we engage stakeholders at a very high level, that they have multiple opportunities to engage in the work, that give feedback. They are the ones on the ground. They're the ones held accountable to these standards. And yes, they need to be high standards, and yes, they need to be high quality, and they need to be rigorous so that we can look at outcomes, not inputs, but do our due diligence on the authorizer side and hold schools accountable to the outcomes that are expected. And so hopefully all of our schools will be engaged in that process, as well as some of our external supporters. And we've invited Mississippi First and Empower Mississippi to be a part of that work as well. So each one of those stakeholder groups, as well as you guys, will be involved in that process. So we're really looking forward to that work. And it, like I said, kicked off this week or last week, and ongoing this week. The only other thing I really have on my report outside of public testimony, which we can talk about when we get into when I finish up, and then if we need to take action on that, is the Ethics Commission. And you guys know that the Ethics Commission in recent months has opined on two different issues. One that we ask for an opinion, one that someone else asked for an opinion on. The opinion that resulted in charter governing boards being subject to the state ethics laws was not our opinion request. And I want to make sure that the board understands very clearly, because there is some concern out there in the charter community about that particular opinion that they released. And in fact, on Friday, the commission was in a position where they could either take up for reconsideration the two previous opinions or decline to take them up. And in this case, they declined to take up either one of those previous opinions. So we are under the current opinions as they stand, and that is how we will continue to operate. So one being that that our public governing board members are subject to those ethics laws, and then two was a conflict of interest, and you guys have access to all of that information. So I just wanted to bring that again to your attention and make it really clear that we did not seek that opinion that resulted in the schools becoming subject to the state ethics laws. And I think that is I told y'all it's really short this time. don't have a lot. We didn't have much time with holidays in and all of those things going on between our last meeting and the holidays, so I didn't have a whole lot to report, but I'm happy to entertain any questions or clarifications on anything I've shared. And then if not, we can move on into the comments or conversation around public testimony. So hearing none, Mr. Billingsley, we can move into the discussion around the public testimony and kind of piggyback on what we talked about this morning.
I think that's great. Let's move on.
Okay, very good.
Do you want to take the lead on this?
I'm happy for you guys to take the lead. I kind of set the stage this morning, and then happy to hear from you all on what you're thinking, what my recommendation was, and where you would like for us to go from here.
Okay, I think that the discussion today can go in a number of different directions. I think that in the interest of time, this may be an item that calls for a committee to be formed to address it, rather than try to hammer out all the details of it today. But in the way of background, if any of you, I don't think Ms. Whitty was on the call this morning, but basically what we're talking about is tightening up our processes for the public comments that are made in our meetings and public testimony. That it's addressed in our board bylaws, but it hasn't always been followed to the letter. We've allowed a lot of flexibility in the past for people to make public comment, and what Dr. Carmen-Shire and I talked about last week is trying to figure out a way to tighten that up a little bit, where everybody understands how the process is going to work going forward, not just the board members and the staff, but the people who would request public comment. And I think that the appointment of a committee to address this is probably the best way to go. I'd like to also include in that committee discussion the other thing that we talked about this morning, which Carolyn brought up, and that is the process or the response, for lack of a better word, that we generally make to people who come to the board, come to us as individuals, whether formally or informally, and expecting us to be able to unilaterally decide what the charter school authorizer board is supposed to do, or otherwise we need to manage the expectations of the people who would seek us out, whether they're our friends in church, or whether they run into us in the Kroger, or whether they've seen our names on a public document and they try to find us to, generally it's not to tell us what a great job we're doing, it's generally to register a complaint of some kind. None of us have any problem with that, but there's a way that we need to be perceived by the public, and that is as a sort of we set the vision, we make the 30,000 foot decisions, and we leave the operation of the day-to-day operation up to Dr. Carmen-Shire and her staff. And I think we need to probably have a little bit of discussion on how we address that with the people that need to hear it. So those are the things that I'd like to see our committee on let's call it the committee on public comment, or if somebody can think of a better word, a better name. It will just be a temporary committee. I don't think there will be any permanent, because all we're going to do is address that one little section of the bylaws, but we need to do it in a formal way. So does anybody have any questions or any other suggestions?
Mr. Billingsley, this is Carolyn Willis, and I couldn't agree with you more that we should probably take this up in a committee work session so that we are clear before bringing this to the entire board to vote on. And so my only question is, do we need a motion to move this forward?
I'm not sure. I think maybe the chair can appoint committee members without a motion. Is that the way you understand it, Dr. Cromarshire?
Yes, I believe the bylaws allow for the committee chair to appoint ad hoc committees as needed. So I believe we can do an appointment just based on your position.
Okay, well, I would like to appoint myself and Carolyn Willis to the board. We need, or to the committee rather. It would be helpful if we have one other person. Is there anyone that would like to volunteer? Well, in that case, the appointment usually goes to the junior person on the board. So Kimberly, are you willing to
just,
on this?
I was just going to volunteer. It just took a minute for me to get unmuted. Sorry about that, Bill. But yes, of course, I'd be happy to help you guys.
Okay, so I appreciate that. And we will go ahead and form that committee of three. And Dr. Cromarshire, we would like for you to obviously be in on it as well. So would you, after this meeting, would you take a poll the committee members and see when's a convenient time for us to have our first session, and we'll take it from there.
Sure, absolutely. One thing I do want to point out, just for those people who were not on the call earlier today, and Ms. Whittier in particular, you know, our public testimony is in the bylaws. We have two sections, 8.1 and 8.2, and they're a little wonky in their language. So one requires a certain step, one requires another step, and they kind of blend together in some ways, but are very different in others. And so our goal is to get that cleaned up, get it articulated, get the expectations out there so that when people do want to, one, submit something in writing and or B, make a public comment, that we are treating every situation equitably and that we are fair and we're following our own policy so that we don't end up treating one group one way and one group another way. So we just want to flesh this out, the language of it, and make sure it's where we need it to be. And that way we ensure that we're complying with our own bylaws, right? And that we are not, our goal is not to eliminate any type of public comment or anything. It's just to make it clean so that what we do is fair and equitable to everybody, because we want to be transparent and we want to hear from our constituents, whoever they are, whether they're a public group, an advocacy group, or they happen to be from a charter leader. We want to be able to hear from them, but we want to do it in that logistical, you know, organized fashion that has processes and procedures in there.
Thank you, Lisa, for articulating that. You do that so very well. But absolutely, that's what we want to do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do you have anything else on the executive director report?
I don't.
Okay, well, let's move on to the financial report.
If you're,
Denise?
I'm here, if you're ready.
Okay.
I'm going to be like Dr. Cromarshire. I have a very short report. Since y'all met in December, there's only been 1 month of expenditures that we really need to look at. I do want to point out, and we talked about this some, that salaries, the way that your financial reports are designed is the top half is for operational expense and the bottom part is for federal expense. So you do see salaries in both the operations and in the federal line items. And that's because we have Dr. Brumfield's salary split. So the CSP is paying for part of her salary. As is expected, we had no travel expense or any equipment expense during this fiscal year. Almost everything that was expended since the last report has been for routine items. There were a couple of minor things that I did want to point out. In the contractual line item, we did pay for a membership to the Mississippi Economic Council, and we did pay for the staff to all attend the Excellence in Ed's National Summit, EdPalooza. And I want to point out that was a 3-day training session that only cost $149 for each staff member to go. So that was a great opportunity that the board was able to do at very little cost. And again, the federal expenditures were lower than normal. We only had one CSP payment to a school during the month of December. And one thing I forgot to report last month was that we have collected all of the revenue that was billed for the last year for the local assessments. So all of that money has been received at this point. I don't think I have anything else unless y'all have questions.
I have one additional item for you, Denise. If you don't mind articulating the process now by which we will refund the Treasury and then ultimately refund G5 through the collection of those dollars on the repayment from Ambition Prep.
Okay, be glad to. We received that check as a repayment of an expense that was questioned last week. We have made the process to put that into the accounting records and to transfer that money into our fund, our Treasury fund. That money will go back, and we have separate Treasury funds for each pot of money. So we have a pot just for the federal expenses. So that revenue that came in, that was the repayment, will go into the federal pot of money, the federal Treasury fund. We will not record it as revenue. We will record it as a refund of an expense, so that it will show that we are getting the money back, that it was never really truly expended. The process for getting it into the federal government's accounting records, we'll have to work on. Dr. Brumfield and Dr. Commentary and I will make sure that that's handled correctly. But we've got all of the funds received and the transaction ready to go into our own fund. Is that what you needed?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted the board to understand, one, we have received the funds, and two, we're in the process of ensuring that it goes through the Treasury to G5 and the federal government in an appropriate way.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Okay, are there any other questions? If not, let's move to committee reports. Dr. Karmachira, are there any committee reports?
Not to my knowledge. I don't think we have anybody that has a committee report that they'd like to comment on today. I think we're in good shape.
Okay, in that case, let's move on to the public comment section of the meeting. Do we have anyone that wishes to make a public comment?
Gordon?
Yes, sir. We did have Dr. Tamala Boyd-Shaw from LaFleur Legacy sign up for public comment today.
Okay, is Dr. Shaw, are you available? Are you on the call?
Yes, sir, I am here.
Okay, we're happy to hear your comment. Please try to keep it within 5 minutes and try to have it relate to one of the action items on the agenda. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair Billingsley. I appreciate the opportunity to offer this public comment. And as I noted on my submission form, I wasn't sure which item on the agenda would go under either executive director report or the, I think it's called the finance report, but it relates to CSP. So as noted, I am Dr. Tamala Boyd-Shaw, the founder and executive director of Mississippi Delta Academies, who's operating LaFleur Legacy Academy. As I understand it, board members, there are 3 of us charter networks currently receiving this much needed grant, and for that we are appreciative. Now, this of course does not include the most recently approved charter school. So around mid-November, we received an email from Dr. Brumfield informing us of the updated process for submitting these reimbursements. And that update outlined a very clear and concise process. What I am asking the board to consider is adding to that process a timeline. The only date noted for us in the process is something that we have been doing, and that's submitting the claims by the 15th of each month. And board members, it would be extremely, extremely helpful to us as school leaders to also have dates for review and release of funds. So I offer this suggestion similar to that of MDE, especially since we will be moving to the MDE accounting manual. So as it relates to all funding from MDE, districts have a timeline for reimbursement claims to be submitted, just as MCSAB does, but there is also a date on which districts receive the reimbursement. So, and this is very, very helpful for budgeting purposes. Again, I encourage the board to consider modeling MDE in the reimbursement procedures with date timelines attached to the CSP reimbursement process. Thank you, board members, for allowing this public comment. I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments to be made?
No, sir.
If not, let's move on to the new business action items. Dr. Carmen, would you care to take the lead on these?
Sure. Thank you. On item A, that is something we've referenced already, but to consider the formation of the legislative committee. I have asked Mr. Billingsley and Ms. Cook to serve on that committee under the direction of Ms. Remack, and she has graciously agreed to serve as the chair of that committee. I alluded to what the expectations would be with respect to the legislative task force and taking the recommendations from the task force to the committee, to the board, ultimately for an approval on what we need to share with the legislature this year in terms of ask, as well as we have several different areas. I think there are 4 different areas, if I recall correctly, that impact only the authorizer board. And so the legislative committee would consider those areas as well, as far as what to take, what not to take to the legislature for consideration this year as a technical amendment. One area that that we would put forth that, and I'm going to pull this up so I don't get this wrong if I've got my notes here, but one area that would impact the schools that we are going to ask for, with your permission and as the task force or as the legislative committee and the final board decision on that, which would be to, I get to it here so I can find it, make sure I have the right one. It has to do with funding and initial funding for charter schools, and I'm going to find it. Pardon me while I flip over all my notes here. Okay, under 372855, charter school funding, adequate education program payments, local funding, federal and state categorical aid program monies, state transportation funding, and so forth. Prior to me getting here, there was guidance that went out to applicants, and in that guidance, there was language to suggest to the applicants to put in their initial budget 1 teacher unit for special ed and 1 teacher unit for gifted. That was prior to the current staff at MDE and legal staff and program staff, and prior to their interpretation of the law. The new people and their interpretation was different from the former. There was, of course, a gap in the leadership here at the authorizer board, and so that happened unbeknownst to me, although it came from me because it was crafted prior to, and that was the only guidance that we really had to share with potential applicants at that time. Having said that, one of our operators was in a position where they were finding it challenging to get funding for, in particular, a gifted unit, a gifted teacher, because program requirements call for one thing and the law calls for another. The law uses the language serve and number of students, where the guidance said that they would be entitled to. So there was a disconnect there. And in order to ensure that doesn't happen again to any of our future applicants or future schools, I am proposing that we insert language into the law that says during its initial year of operation, public charter schools will receive 1 gifted teacher unit and 1 special ed teacher unit going forward. This would eliminate the challenges. It would provide additional dollars for the schools to operate in year 1 that may be reconciled and look different in year 2, depending on the number of children they serve. But it would give them the startup funds that they need to operate initially. So those are the kinds of things that I'll bring before the legislative committee with respect to the authorizer board only, and or indirectly and or directly impacting new applicants. So I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of what that will look like.
Thank you for that. I have a suggestion that I'd like for the board to consider. We already know that we are not necessarily behind, but the legislature moves very fast. We have essentially, we're talking about a three-layer process with a legislative task force, a legislative committee, and the board. I think that what I'd like to suggest is we streamline that a little bit, and the board authorize the legislative committee to go ahead and either I would move that we approve what Dr. Carmen Shira just suggested for that particular piece of legislation. Anyway, but what I'd really like for us to consider is that the legislative committee not have to necessarily wait for the approval of the full board to go ahead and give Dr. Carmen Shira or anyone else that is helping us at the legislature the direction that they need as far as we're concerned. And if someone would like to put that into the form of a motion, I'd be glad to entertain it.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. And do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Jordan, if the motion is passed, Jordan, if you need some help with the language, let me know after the meeting and I'll be glad to help you put that language that I put my intent into not so much language.
Thank you. That will really be helpful so that once we present all of the findings from tomorrow and these recommendations from our office specifically to the legislative committee, then they will be able to say yay or nay, put their rubber stamp on something, go forward with these things, and we will make that happen then. Not to say what will happen over at the legislature, but we'll take it over there and put our ask in front of them. So.
Well, that's the important thing, and it's even more important to get it done on time, because if you're a day late, it doesn't matter how good it is.
That's right.
Okay, I'd also like to, I will entertain a motion to go ahead and form the legislative committee. We've talked about what it's going to do, but we didn't really form it yet. So would somebody please make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Speed. Any second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. The legislative committee is formed.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. You ready for me to go on, Mr. Billy?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Item B, C, and D actually all go together. That would be to ask the board to consider the approval of the 2021 Call for Quality Schools Letter of Intent, the application for new schools, and the application for existing schools. The only things that changed within these documents from last year would be the dates and the process with respect to the letter of intent. It was a Word document submit through, and our professional technical assistance provider who's worked with the applicants in the application cycle created a really nice spreadsheet through Excel, which will make it a much simpler process for applicants to go in and fill in what they need. So that's the only, and it's really just a kind of a logistical change there in terms of how they'll submit that. So with your approval, we can consider those three documents, I think, together, and then we will be able to release those on Friday with approval, and they'll go out and we'll officially start our 2021 cycle for quality schools.
All right, any questions? Will someone make a motion to approve those three documents?
So moved.
Thank you. A second.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion is passed. Those three letters are approved, or those three RFP, the documents are approved. Go ahead.
Just an FYI, on those three documents, you had links in your packets this time to those. Is that helpful, just out of curiosity, to make it easier than kind trying to scroll through hundreds of pages? Does it make it easier for you guys to be able to click a link, look at the document, and then close your link and move on?
Yes.
Yes, it is for me for sure.
Okay. Okay, good. Well, that was our goal. We wanted to make it a little simpler and cleaner for you in terms of accessing your board packet. So we'll continue to use that process then going forward, where and when we can. With respect to item E, this is the consideration to approve a request for an extension for Revive Prep, and that's a K-8 school under Republic Schools, Inc. So you have in your packet a letter of request, and we would ask that you consider that extension.
Are there any questions to that on the letter? Has everyone had a chance to read it? Would everyone like to take a minute and take a look through the letter? Okay, does anyone have any questions on the letter?
I will make a note before the vote that just according to Mississippi Code 372821, an approved charter may delay its opening for one school year in order to plan and prepare for the school's opening. If the school does require an opening delay of more than 1 year, the school must request an extension from the authorizer, and then the board may grant or deny that extension depending on the particular school's circumstances. That's current law with respect to this request.
Do you know if the letter is considered to be public?
All of these documents are public.
Okay, would you make sure that Kate Royals gets a copy of it?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve the Republic Schools request for extension.
I so move.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. The extension is approved. I am not aware, Dr. Carmen-Chira, I'm not aware of a need to go into executive session, but I might have missed it.
No, sir, not to my knowledge.
Okay, then at that point, is there any other new business that the board would like to bring up? If not, then let's, the next meeting is on March 8th, 2021. I'm presuming that we won't be any better off then than we are now as far as the virus is concerned. So let's plan on it being another Zoom meeting. I really appreciate everyone's patience. And I know sometimes we have connection problems and it makes it a little bit harder when we're not all in the same room, but I really appreciate the effort that everyone is putting forth to be sure that, that we do the best we can. Given that, if there's no other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
A second, please.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 And we are adjourned. Jordan, just give me a call if you need me to help you with that language on the motion.
Okay, yes, sir, I will.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Right.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Aye.
Denise, bye. Y'all